have been celebrating Black History all month, and today I am honored to introduce our speaker, Dr. Beverly Price. She is the daughter of the late Janet Jones and Robert Pearson. She grew up in Dadeville, Alabama, where she graduated from Dadeville High School. She attended Auburn University, Faulkner University, Auburn University, Montgomery, earning a bachelor's, master's, education specialist, and educational doctorate. She has worked as a teacher, assistant principal, director of secondary schools, deputy superintendent, and is now the superintendent of Alexander City Schools. She attends Haven Chapel, United Methodist Church, where she is chairman of the church council and an usher.
All right.
She is married to Mr. Rick Price, and they have 2 daughters, Brooke, who is a nurse, and Brandon, who is a teacher at Jim Pearson School. She has one son-in-law, Barry George. She and her husband have 1 grandson, Zion, and a brand new granddaughter, Zara. Dr. Price can describe her journey in one statement: dedicated to God and determined to win in life.
All right.
New Poplar Springs, and yes, I introduce to some and present to others the first Black and female superintendent of Alexander City Schools, Dr. Beverly Price.
Good morning. Giving honor to God, without whom I will be nothing, and with whom I'm all that I am.
All right.
Pastor Jacobs, the officers of this church, members and friends, I bring you greetings from Haven Chapel United Methodist Church in Dadeville, Alabama, where Reverend James Gresham is our pastor. I didn't stand when you asked for guests because I feel like I'm at home. I got so many family here, and I want to acknowledge Pam and Lisa right now because they have been such strong supporters of me, always encouraging me throughout my journey, and so I just wanted to say that publicly. And I also want to say one other thing. I texted Pam this morning and asked her if I could dress casually because it goes along with what I want to talk about. And she said, sure, but I'm sure when she saw me, she didn't think I meant this casual. But it does go along, and I do want to ask a question. Is there Wi-Fi?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, could I get on it because my paper is in
Yes,
Google. Let's see. NPS Sanctuary.
Yes, ma'am.
2G or let's see.
Your tablet.
Is there a password?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the password?
256 825 6245.
I do apologize. I didn't even think about downloading it.
That's all.
That didn't work for me. You said 256.
825 4265.
I think that's going to work. Yeah. So while I'm waiting on that, I do want to say that, again, like I said, I do apologize also for coming in tardy. I misjudged the time that it would take me to get down here. Maybe it'll connect in just a minute. And I am going to take this off. But like I said, it does go along with what I want to talk about today. So we have made it to Black History Month of 2023. And I'm sure if you were like me back in 2020, when we had COVID rampaging across the United States, and we had the George Floyd incident, you may not have been so certain that we were going to make it to 2023. But so we made it. And the theme of Black History Month across the United States is Black resistance. But I have chosen to talk to you today. I'm going to talk about Black resistance, but I'm also going to talk about what it says on the back of my jacket. It says there is greatness in our DNA. It says on the sleeve, there's greatness in our DNA. It says along the pocket, somewhere up here on my pants, it says there is greatness in our DNA. Right. And I want to add to that, we are nevertheless always the more.
Yes, ma'am.
So, it is not connecting, so I'm gonna depend on the Holy Spirit to help this 57-year-old mind to remember what I was going to talk to you about this morning. But again, like I said, we're going to talk about black resistance, and what does that mean, and why is it so important to black history? Well, black resistance is so important because even as slaves on the soon-to-be slaves on the slave ships, they resisted because they knew that it wasn't right what was happening to them. From jumping into the Atlantic Ocean to refusing to eat, those that said that they would never be slaves, that they would never taste the bitterness of slavery, they would never smell the stench of slavery, they protested and they resisted from the very beginning. And then those that then did touch soil in America and became slaves, they had small acts of resistance. Anything from sabotaging the work, arson, hiding tools, pretending to be lazy. Those were small acts of resistance. And then there were also those acts of resistance that you hear about, such as the rebellion that was, or the revolt that was led by Nat Turner. And then, of course, those that Harriet Tubman led to slavery on the Underground Railroad. All of those were issues of black resistance. And I just wanted to throw that in there because it's black history. But I also want to talk to you about what it means to resist and why people resist. Most of the times when people say black history, what's the first name that comes to mind? Martin Luther King. I'm not going to talk about Martin Luther King. But I am going to base it on a quote that he had. He said, "It is always the right time to do the right thing." And when you know it's the right time to do the right thing, and you couple that with resistance, good things happen. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 people that realized it was the right time to resist. The first one being 6-year-old Ruby Bridges out of New Orleans. At 6 years old, she went to a segregated school in New Orleans. And at the time, the law to integrate schools had been passed, but of course in the Deep South, they paid that no attention. But in New Orleans, they did decide that they would integrate a school. So how are they going to do that? They gave the students a test. You had to pass a test to prove that you were worthy to go to school with white children. Well, Ruby Bridges, along with 5 others, passed the test, which I don't doubt was biased. But she passed the test. Now, her father didn't want her to go to school, to this segregated white school, but her mother did. And so in the end, they chose that she would go. On the first day of school, Ruby Bridges, 6 years old, flanked by federal marshals, walked into a school. She had to walk down a sidewalk that was lined with a mob of people that were spitting at her, hurling racial slurs at her, hurling threats at her and her family. But at 6 years old, this courageous, brave little girl walked into that school so that our children today can sit in integrated schools. Now, she chose to do this, as every other person that chooses to resist. She chose to do this. She didn't just choose to do it that one day. She chose to do it for a year, and it got so bad that the federal marshals even told her parents she can't eat in the lunchroom because we don't know what they'll do to her food, so she had to bring her lunch every day. Now, the white people eventually start to send their children back to school with Ruby, but the fact of the matter is that she continued to go after a year. So you see, Ruby Bridges chose a walk of resistance. Right. She walked into that school for a year. Then that brings us to Rosa Parks, who at 42, we all know the story, she refused to get out of her seat. Right. So Rosa Parks chose a sitting of resistance. Right. And what she did sparked, of course, the Montgomery bus boycott that crippled the economy in Montgomery. That not only led to the integration of the bus in Montgomery, it also led to there being equal fares for blacks and whites on the buses in Montgomery, but it also played an instrumental role in the integrating of schools in Alabama as well. Because what Rosa Parks did as she sat there is that she let the whole United States know what atrocities were being placed upon African Americans in Alabama. So she sort of zoomed the lens on what was happening in Alabama, and that was instrumental in the passage of the Civil Rights Movement as well. So at 42, Rosa Parks decided that she would sit so that we would have our rights. She resisted through sitting. And then one of my favorites is John Lewis.
Yes.
Good trouble. He stayed in good trouble. John Lewis was a sharecropper's son from right here in Alabama. When he was in college, he helped to organize sit-ins at lunch counters where black people could not sit. And I remember my mama talking about this, and so that's why I love his story so much. Not only did he organize sit-ins, but he also was a freedom rider. He rode buses into the Deep South to test, to see if the law enforcement was enforcing those laws that were meant to protect us. And of course, what he found out, just like at the lunchroom counters, was that they were not being enforced. He was not only jailed, but he was also beaten. But probably his most courageous act of courage that stands out in my mind is when he led, on March 7th, 1965, when he led the march across, 600 people across Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. We all know that that was called Bloody Sunday now. And he was not unconscious on that bridge. But that didn't stop him from continuing to march. So John Lewis not only sat at lunchroom counters, he not only walked across Edmund Pettus Bridge, but he also was a freedom rider. So he sat, he walked, and he rode in resistance so that we could have our rights. And because of Ruby Bridges, Rosa Parks, John Lewis, we can sit in all different kinds of chairs.
That's right.
Right now, today, we sit on city councils. We sit on county commissions. We sit in government seats. We sit in school superintendent chairs.
Yes, ma'am.
We even sat in the highest chair in the land as the President of the United States of America. And when they don't offer us a seat, we do what Shirley Chisholm told us to do.
Yes,
we bring our own chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you see, there is greatness in our DNA. We're nevertheless always the more. And so, as I was thinking about what else I was going to say, it brought me about where else have we resisted? Because we've not just resisted in protest, we've also resisted in poetry. And one of the first poems that I learned was written by Langston Hughes. Now, I learned this when I was in high school.
All right.
I'm 57 years old. Y'all do the math. That was a long time ago. I had it in my paper. I'm going to try to recite it to you now. But it's I Too by Langston Hughes.
All right.
I, too, sing America.
All right.
I'm the darker brother. They send me to sit in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I will sit at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare tell me eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. Well, y'all, they still don't see how beautiful we are. We still sometimes are not invited to the table, although they are wanting to send us back. I just want to say this. How many of you have heard of critical race theory, CRT?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so critical race theory, I'm going to say one of my first duties as a superintendent was to hire a principal at Stevens Elementary School. So I did. We made a great hire. We had her introduction. And so there was a young man there as we were introducing. He called me to the side and he said, I just want to know if y'all going to be teaching critical race theory. And I said, well, that depends. And he said, what does it depend on? Because the Alabama legislature said that it's against the law. I said, well, that depends on what critical race theory you're talking about.
That's right.
And he said, I'm talking about critical race theory. And I said, well, what is critical race theory? So he looked at me like I was supposed to know. And guess what? I know. Because there's greatness in my DNA.
Yes, ma'am.
Nevertheless, I'm always the more.
Yes,
so I told him, I said, well, what I want you to understand is that critical race theory is a theory that's taught in law school. And what it says is that because the institutions and the laws of America are founded and written by white men, there is inherent bias in those institutions and in those laws because they were written to benefit the white man.
Right.
But that's not what I was told, what you were told wrong, sir. And you see, we have never taught critical race theories in the schools in Alabama, so it's easy for the legislature to pass something that forbid us to do something we were not already doing. See, that was a political ploy, and it worked. But I want you to understand that critical race theory is one of those things that is being used to hopefully get us to stop teaching about our rich history. Because remember, we're not the only one that knows there is greatness in our DNA. We're not the only ones that know we are nevertheless, we're always the more. So some people want to make us believe that we're the less. But I want you to urge, if there is ever a time that that topic ever comes up, I ask you to be present and to speak your voice. I also want to just to say this. Our young children need to know our history.
Yes.
They need to know the importance of resistance. But they also need to know, just like Martin Luther King said, it's always the right time to do the right thing, but there's also a right way to do it. Sometimes resistance is the answer, but it's not always the answer. But I want you to know that I am proud of those that walked before me, because it is because of those that sat before me that a little nappy-headed black girl from across the creek in Dadeville, Alabama, learned how to read. You know, there was a time when I wasn't supposed to read.
Jesus.
There would have been a time when I lived in a different time and place, they would have thought I couldn't read, or that I couldn't even learn to read. But because there were those that risked life and limb for me to learn how to read, now I am a very well-read person. And I don't say that to brag or boast. I say that to say this, but God. Because had it not been for God, we would have still been in that place. And I also say that to give respect to those that look past the meanest old man in the South, Jim Crow, and look toward a future that would see not just their children, but their children's children and their children's children being successful in this thing called life. But I want you to understand that while Jim Crow is sleeping, Donald Trump and his sycophants are thinking. And they are trying to make sure that history is, they want to make sure that we don't continue to rise up. The song by Andrew Day says, and I'll rise up. And she says, I'll do it 1,000 times again. I want y'all to know that's what our ancestors did. 1,000 times again and again and again they rose up. There have been many acts of resistance that were defeated. You don't know about those because you only hear about the successful ones. Thank God for the ones that didn't work, and I thank God for the ones that did. So I want to leave you just by saying, and I didn't say everything that I wanted to say because the Holy Spirit led me not to. But I do want y'all to know this. When Pam read my introduction, and so I've been told that I've made history. But history is not about being the first to do something. History is about making an impact. Right. So every day when I get up and I go do my job, I pray to God that I make the right decisions, not just about black children, not just about white children, not just about Hispanic children, not just about Asian kids, but any child that crosses the path of Alexander City Schools. Because you see, again, a little girl that was not supposed to learn how to read now makes decisions about what a whole school system will read. A little girl that is not supposed to understand the complexities of calculus now not only makes the decisions about the math courses that little black girls and little black boys will be studying. I also make those decisions about little white girls and little white boys. And then I want you to also understand that a little black girl who was once thought only to be worthy to attend a segregated school now leads an entire integrated school system. And that's not because of me. That's not because of nothing I've done, nothing I said. That is because of the giants that stood before me, that withstood the beatings, that withstood the racial slurs. They withstood things that I probably couldn't take. But they did it so that I could be in the position where I am, so that I can make things better for those. And that's all I ask of you. My challenge to you is to make sure that your children understand that there is greatness in your DNA. And when they try to make you feel less, make them understand that you are never the less. Yes. You are always the more. Right. Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank Reverend Jacobs for that sermon. And Dr. Price, thank you also for that inspiring message. appreciate us. And to everybody that was on the program that I asked, thank you for being participating in the program. And I just want to leave us with this. As Sister Sands would always say, we're not just black in February. We are black 365